Bruce Lipton, heard of Bruce Lipton? Okay, Bruce Lipton is a cell biologist, studied cells, a professor, and what he found in the cells in the human body is they used to think that the DNA was the brain of the cell, and anything, if it has a brain, if you take the brain out, it dies. But what he found out is they took the DNA out, and the cell survived. So it couldn't have been the brain. And what he found was the brain actually didn't exist in the DNA in the middle of the cell. The brain was in the outer layer of the cell, in the membrane, which is kind of interesting that it's the same word, membrane. So people say, nature or nurture. Is it your environment that creates who you are, or is it your DNA that creates who you are, or is it something you were taught, or do we have choice, free will, all this stuff? Okay, so if we use this cell as a metaphor for how we work, then the outer environment has an effect on us, just like it has an effect when we're kids, when we start believing that's who we are, because that was the experience we had when we were kids. But if we got switched when we were in the hospital, and you went off to live with some affluent family or some family in another culture or whatever, you would have had a completely different experience. Same you, same DNA, but you would have grown up thinking you were something else because of that experience. So the outer environment of the cell affects the cell. The same way when you think a thought that flushes a chemical, it's going to affect your cell. And what happens is cells have receptor sites. And the more particular emotion you have, the more particular chemical is hitting that cell, more receptor sites for that particular emotion are going to happen on that cell. So then you've got more receptor sites, which means you can take in more chemical, which then your cell starts saying, give me more, give me more. So if you're really, really sad, you're gonna want more of that. Your body is gonna start asking for more of that chemical. And if you're really, really happy, you'll have more receptor sites for that. You're gonna feel happy more often because you're taking in more into that cell. The cell's gonna have the experience of whatever emotion you're feeling more often. Which is another way of saying whatever you put your attention on grows, and whatever you take your attention away from goes away, because the receptor sites grow, and the less you have, the receptor sites for that particular emotion will go in. So imagine that you are a cell in the body of humanity, or whatever, life, and you're walking around and you have this skin, and you have this outer environment, and your skin takes in things, and you start to put out more feelers for whatever you're used to, and take in more, receive. So you have your receptors. You open up to something. You give permission to let it in, just like a cell does. So if you're used to a particular, this is huge, right? If you're used to a particular experience, you are going to be seeing more of it. You're going to be feeling that emotion and seeing more of it and thinking that's what the world is, because that's the 40 bits you're picking up out of the 40 million of everything that's there, because you have more receptor sites for it. So there's a saying, or whatever, it has been said, that the gates of heaven open inward. The gates of heaven open inward.
I never heard that before.
Okay, so this is a big one. Imagine that these receptors are like gates. You give permission and let things in, and you close them and keep things out. So the gates of heaven open inward. Imagine, what do they always say about heaven? It's within you. Heaven is within. It's not out here somewhere. It's within you. That's where you experience heaven, inside yourself. So, say you have a gate. What is your heaven? You like cows. You like dolphins. You have a beautiful description of that heart and why the heart meant something to you. When you're talking about that, that's an experience, right? That's something, that's heaven for you. Peace. And we all have so much more. We all have our own ideas of what heaven is. That's what we let in. Heaven to me is, something that feels like the sun when I'm going for a run. Heaven to me is I've gone for a run, I'm hot and sweaty, and I dive in the ocean. That's heaven. That's heaven to me. That feeling is heaven to me. Okay. So if I've ever had an experience of that, I can call on that experience at any time and feel that inside my body at any time. Because you choose the emotion ahead of time. Not based on circumstance. And that's what non-circumstantial means. What's another word for non-circumstantial? Unconditional. Same word. Non-circumstantial, unconditional. Which means conditions do not dictate my emotions. I do. I generate them. I don't pull them from outside. That's false. Pulling an emotion from outside is false. Emotions arise from within. So if I create heaven inside my body, and I say, I'm not letting anything that's not heaven to me in, I have that power. Because the gates open inward. And I'm the one who gives the permission to open and close the gates. So if something shows up in my environment that I don't feel is heaven, the gates are closing. You bring me heaven or my gates are closed. But here's the thing. How do I stay in heaven if I'm walking around judging everything as good, bad, right, wrong? You can't. You can't. You have to remain in heaven in order to see heaven and experience heaven. So all of a sudden, you're not walking around judging everything good, bad, right, and wrong. Scary, right? If I see everything as good, I might end up with something bad not knowing it's bad. It doesn't happen. Because you can tell. When you're in heaven, you can tell what's not heaven. And you close your gates. You don't give permission to something that doesn't feel good. Because there are things that don't feel good. And when you see them, you just keep moving. And you go, I'm in heaven. I'm in heaven here. I'm in heaven. I don't stick around when it doesn't feel like heaven. You just don't. You create it inside first. You feel it. You know you're in it. You know this is your choice. If you choose. If you choose. It's your choice. Some people choose not heaven. Some people choose to be in hell. Hell is like, it's horrible. Everything's terrible. Complaint. It's bad. But sometimes people need that to experience that for some reason because there's some critical thought in their mind that says, I need this in order to allow myself that. And that's process. That's okay. That's okay. There's no judgment. There's no judgment on anything. It's all good. It's all available. It's all choice. There's no, you should be in heaven. You know, you can. No. You should follow your own process. Whatever works for you. Whatever makes sense to you. Be in that. Find the process that works for you from where you're at. Because your mind is brilliant. Your mind will choose and give permission to what makes sense to you. That's what minds are for. They're ours. I'm not my mind, but I can use my mind. I can use my mind in a healthy way to create my life however I want. And it is where it is, and I am where I am, and I'll start from here and go where I'm going.